Hi everyone, today we're going to take a look at probably the most creative way that you can use ChatGPT with Midjourney. And this isn't about creating some intricate, elaborate prompt formula in ChatGPT that like spews out hundreds of Midjourney images. So I've mostly stayed away from the idea of using ChatGPT as a Midjourney engine, even though I realize there probably are some novel uses for it, but for the most part, it all kind of feels a little too automated for me. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I always like to stress the human element of using these AI tools. So the idea of using ChatGPT like whole cloth to make prompts just seemed a bit reductive to me, and also kind of not fun. But both ChatGPT and Midjourney are very powerful tools, so I knew that there would be a potential to synchronize the two of them in a unique way. And indeed, I did run across a method that I think is phenomenal, and I'm going to share that with you today, run you through the whole thing. We're going to take a look at some images, and then to coin a billiards phrase, we're going to put some English on it. All right, let's go dive in. So I ran across this technique from a guy named David Hardy on a Midjourney forum. David, by the way, if you're watching and you want me to link something, a website or anything, just let me know and I'll pin it below. Basically, the technique begins by running a describe on an image. In this case, I just took one that I'd previously generated, cinematic design, imagination, montage, no text, copy words, AR16.9, and then we run a describe on it. Describe returns to us 4 prompts, an imaginary city in a fantasy atmosphere. There's an old mystical fantasy town with lots of buildings and decorations. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but yeah, I mean, you know how describe works. And if you don't know how describe works, I did do a video on it kind of recently. It's linked below. Quick note as well, in our recent office hours, Midjourney did let us know that the describe results are not connected to the Midjourney prompt language model. So it's kind of its own independent thing, kind of like clip interrogator. That's not to say that it isn't really useful though. It just does explain why sometimes describe will give you these prompts that Midjourney clearly is just ignoring. I should say for V6 and V7, they are working pretty hard on the language model, so I do expect those to be connected at some point or another. It's not for right now. So now that we have our 4 describe prompts, we're going to take them over to ChatGPT. And just as a quick note, I did try this out on Bing Chat as well. It seems to work, although you got to finesse Bing Chat a little bit more. Anyhow, once you're in ChatGPT, you're going to want to run the following prompt. Please create a truncated tokenized summary that blends specific details and cultural influences from 4 descriptions I will supply when ready, emphasizing the hybridization of these descriptions. Prioritize specific details over generalizations and use varied sentence structures. The resulting summary should be around 30 keywords long and should not include any reference to the prompt that generated it or the methodology used to arrive at it. And ChatGPT returns to us with a hybridization of all 4 of those prompts. So the plus side in having ChatGPT do this is that by adding in the truncated tokenized summary command at the top, it's outputting something that should probably fit within the token limit length of Midjourney. If you're kind of confused about the whole token system, I get it. It is a pretty confusing topic. I do go over that in the describe video that I mentioned earlier, once again, linked below. So let's take a look at the 4 describe outputs plus our ChatGPT hybridized version. So just as a quick refresh, this was our initial image. Describe 1 got us this. This was our image for describe 2. This was our image for describe 3, which is really cool. It's very different than all of the other ones. I think it's pretty neat actually. And this was our image for describe 4. So overall, pretty cool. And this was our output for our hybridized version, which pretty much looks in line with our other outputs, minus number 3. So now we've proven that it works. So let's kick it up a notch. So as you know, when you run a prompt in Midjourney, you end up with a grid of 4 images. In this case, cinematic still, idyllic, sci-fi, and we get these 4 images. So what if we were to run a describe on all 4 of those images at once and then hybridize them in ChatGPT? So running all 4 images at once in describe led to some pretty interesting results. In the first describe, it mentions a tree and a pond. In the second description, it talks about cinematic sets, mysterious jungles, Xbox 360 graphics as well, but well, whatever. And you know, in the fourth one, we've got emotional landscapes, quiet contemplation. So it's an interesting blend of all 4 of those images per prompt. So then having ChatGPT take all 4 of those and kind of compressing them all together, we end up with a prompt, spaceship, tree, pond, on and on it goes. Let's take a look at what we got here. So our first describe was pretty interesting. It really focused in on that tree. I think it lost a lot of the sort of sci-fi alien elements, but it still ended up as a cool image. Our second describe brought us these images, which I think are kind of cool. It kind of gave us that image within an image thing that Midjourney sometimes does. Yeah, pretty neat. Definitely back to the alien landscapes. Here's another output from that describe that I think kind of leaned more towards the first image in our initial describe set, as it kind of has the same kind of color palette to it. And our last describe, which I think looks really, really nice. So now let's take a look at our ChatGPT hybridized version. And so here it is. And it's interesting because it kind of ended up becoming a whole other thing and going into a different direction. Definitely much more in the jungle-y side than the previous images. The spaceship tends to be much more prominent. And then in the bottom two images, characters. In the other ones, there were characters, they were just much more distant, but in that third image, we're much closer to a characters. So I think this shows that we can use this technique to get outputs that differ from describe, which got me thinking, well, maybe we could use this almost as a better blend. So let's take a few of the most famous paintings of all time and see what we can do with it. So I initially tried to experiment with Van Gogh's Starry Night, but I think that image is so iconic that the describes come back as Van Gogh's Starry Night, or Starry Night is depicted on the screen. So it felt like that would be too strong an image. So I ended up grabbing his Cafe Terrace at Night, which described as a building with table on it by Van Gogh in the style of atmospheric urbanscapes, painted scene of people outside a cafe with lamps, on and on it goes. I wanted to see if we could combine that with Dali's Persistence of Memory, and just for fun, we'll throw in the Monet. So what I ended up doing was taking just one of those prompts from each of those describes and having ChatGPT merge them together. The results were pretty interesting. I think in this image, it definitely kind of leaned into the Van Gogh-isms, but there's a lot of Dali-isms as well in the center of that frame. And then in this one, I think the sidewalk definitely has a watery look that, is reflecting Monet. So after doing some more experimentation, I did more or less feel that I think having three artists with such iconic styles was just a little too much for Midjourney to juggle all at once. Though I have to admit, there were some cool outputs. They may not necessarily represent like a art jam between Monet, Dali, and Van Gogh, but still, these are kind of cool. So I had an idea to take Monet out and instead replace his prompt with a famous photograph, in this case, the National Geographic cover, Girl with the Green Eyes, I think it's called, which Describe gave back to us as a young woman wearing a red shawl, looking at a camera, red scarf with blue eyes, that's interesting, and a red band, National Geographic photo. So, and then adding that into the ChatGPT mashup and seeing what we got. The results ended up being pretty cool. Like this one in particular, I think had some nice Van Gogh-isms, some nice Dali-isms, and then had, I wouldn't call it a photorealistic character, but a highly rendered character, I guess because of the photographic prompt. So because we were losing the sort of overall vibe and style of the artists when we had three of them, I thought maybe let's take it down to two and see what happens. And that's where we get some magic. So I took two of my favorite paintings, Edward Hopper's Nighthawks and Duchamp's Descending Staircase #2, which if you've ever seen this painting and you're like, I don't get it, it's basically Duchamp was trying to create motion and the movement of time through the painting. So if you look at it, there's a woman walking down the stairs in this photo. It's just happening all at once. So there you go. Look at that. The art degree did something. So Describe gave us a couple of options. I ended up taking #3, Philly's Coffee Shop, 1950, Edward Degas, wrong painter, in the style of photorealistic detail, dark navy, emerald, blah, blah, blah. The Describe on Duchamp came back super surreal. Like the first one was Figure 27 BD person, the lyricist. And then the second one, it actually calls out the year as being 18 million. So yeah, it's pretty great. And got these images, which I do think are pretty cool. One thing to note, and something we've discussed here before, is that Midjourney tends to prioritize words that are at the front of your prompt. Just the same ChatGPT does as well, in that it reads your prompt, but it isn't reading or thinking ahead. So if you change the order of your Describe prompts, you will end up with a different output. In this case, I took the Duchamp and Hopper Nighthawks prompts and reversed them, and we ended up with this image because ChatGPT organized the prompt starting with Philly's Coffee Shop, 1950, Edward Degas. Once again, this is not Edward Degas. But yeah, it ended up kind of a really cool image. I think it lost the Duchampiness of it all, but still a, really nice looking painting. Overall, I think this is the most fascinating use case for combining ChatGPT and Midjourney together. It's certainly miles more interesting to me than the, prompt formula of make me 100 pretty pictures, robot. And there are countless different ways to approach this. Like, I didn't even touch on cinematic styles, which I'm very curious to try later on tonight. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you made it this far and have not hit the like and subscribe button, I do invite you to do so. And if you want to check out that describe video, that is coming up next. I thank you for watching. My name is Tim.